Hi everyone, welcome to another session. Today I'm going to be talking about show and tell project. A couple weeks ago, I've been working on what's known as the project where I want to test the Revit capability of using adaptive component. So this is what I got. Okay, it looks very complicated, but when you look at it, it looks pretty awesome. So this is all built within Revit. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to showcase how I built this. So the first thing I want to do is that I'm just going to go in here and modify the families. Within this family, it has built in a lot of components. So what I have in here is that I have this, which is called the retrofit, and here I have the body, and I have the wheels, 4 sets of wheels. So they're all basically, each of them are Revit components. So you notice that the body itself, okay, is basically made up of adaptive component. So how I built this adaptive component is that I built the side panel and then I mirrored it over, okay. This front panel are basically adaptive components. So if I turn on the points, you notice that this particular model has a lot of points. So a lot of these points, how I interpret them is that I basically got it from the AutoCAD side of things. So when you look at the AutoCAD, what I did inside AutoCAD is that I slice and dice a lot of this model just so that I can basically build this in more of a smaller pieces. So within the AutoCAD side of things, I took and then I break them down into layers as well, so that inside Revit I could actually turn them off, on and off. So I'm just going to show you the original in AutoCAD, what it looks like, and then how I translate that information into Revit. And hopefully, if you like this project, I'm going to keep doing this just to test Revit capability in the future. So inside the AutoCAD side, I'm just going to load it in. Now mind you, this particular Revit family is when I actually built the car only without the retrofit, the size is only 22 megabytes. It's pretty massive for a lot of the families that we encounter. But when I actually add that retrofit, it actually balloons it to 100 megabytes. So yeah, it's not very efficient when it comes to modeling, but unfortunately it is what it is. I cannot control how Revit behaves in terms of how they model this stuff. Funny enough, if you take cat links or import anything DWG, the file sizes are normally pretty small. So if you have a very complicated file, it could get very small. Whereas if you built everything inside Revit, it's always going to be big, regardless of how you size it down. Whether that is Autodesk part, I'm not sure, but hopefully in the future they would fix something. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to open up what it looks like. Okay, so this is what how I do it is that I break it up into pieces. Okay, let's see if I can find the original file. So let's say a reference. Okay, so this is basically what it looks like before I put it into Revit. So let's say continue. It was originally from SketchUp, so what I did is I took the SketchUp file, I put it in. You notice that this is what it looks like originally inside. So when I go hide, and this is what it looks like. Okay, so from AutoCAD side, what I did is that I have to create a bunch of layers. Right now it's just split into one layer. Within this, I break it up into pieces. Okay, so what I have in here is that I have parts. I have one for the support. I'm just going to open up. So this is what it looks like. I just break it down into smaller pieces. I'm just going to go layer. You notice that I'm just basically put them into a layer, okay, like that. So once I put it inside the layer, this is where I'm just going to go in here and insert CAD and just say detail parts. Let's say, for example, if I want the support, I always turn this off, just say color preserve and say okay. And what it does is that I always use the original insertion point. So what that insertion point will do is that it will basically just put that object at the right location. So in here, what I can do is that if I want to model certain things, I use the layers and just say turn certain things off, and I just want to see this part, okay? And then once you break it down to smaller pieces, this is where I could say, okay, I could start modeling stuff. The pipe itself, let's say for example, if I could turn on this piping, right? How I do piping is it's pretty straightforward. Let's say for example I want to do a piping like that. So what I did here, I'm just gonna go open up the component that has all the pipes and say cable. Okay, so let's say this is the cable, that this is how it looks like. So the first thing what I did, I'm just gonna, okay, so that's how much points I translated. Now a lot of these points you can just basically draw it in, draw it in, and then snap it. Okay, Revit has ability to snap into surfaces if you import into AutoCAD. And then once you have this done, all I did is that I picked that point. Let's say for example I picked like multiple points, and then I just say spline through points. And what it does is that gives me all this really smooth kind of a curve. The next thing I would do is that I would import this object which I created, which is called the adaptive circle. So I go edit that. So all I have to do is just give it a point and give it like a radius. Okay, add it in, and now what I would do with this is that take this, take that, and say create form. So what happens is that it's going to basically loft this circles along this line. So that's how I basically create a lot of this zigzaggedy, very organic kind of pipes. Okay. Now once you have all that stuff in, piece it together, what you're gonna get is more or less like this. Okay. There's certain parts that I have to basically build it inside adaptive environment, and in certain cases I have to build it within the regular families. For instance, glass, I always build it inside the regular family, because what happens is that adaptive typically will never get it smooth. So what happens is that it always have this issues with lines, for instance. Like in this particular case, I'm just going to go pretty deep. Okay, notice that this adaptive have a lot of objects. Okay, more deeper. I think this is about like 3 or 4 different layer deep, and then within that, I'm just gonna go in, and there we go. I'm just gonna go into edit that family. You notice that sometimes I just use a regular family, not all the families are created using adaptive. So in this case I did this, and then you know what, it works well because it does not give you that line, because adaptive, if you do curvature kind of surfaces, it will give you this line, will not give you like very perfect kind of like surface that you want. Like for example here, you know, the reason why is that this is something Revit, it's Revit limitation. Even though if you say I want to pick the surface, pick, it sometimes gives you this error message saying that can't do it. That is something Revit limitations. I'm not sure if it's going to be fixed in the future. Now, the nice thing about Revit is that you can add multiple points, and if you want to make this thing even smoother, you can do that. But in this case, I'm just basically just follow it. And not everything is going to be very smooth, because sometimes what happened is that you notice that in this particular case, I forgot to pick those 2 points, and then you notice that there is going to be some little bit of off kind of surfaces. Okay. Now, since this is a model, I'm just testing the capabilities. It's something that, hopefully I'm giving you some information that may be useful for you. So if you're planning to do this kind of a work, I might suggest that you just try to keep it as simple as possible. In here, I put a lot of emphasis on, points, because if you want to get really nice, smooth, organic kind of a shape, you kind of have to define how many points you want to do it. You can do it in grids. In this case, what I did is that I just use whatever is in that surface. So say, for example, in here, if I go hide, okay? So it really depends like how you treat the model. You can use certain tools to cut this up into grids. But in this one, I didn't do that. So what I did is that I just took whatever this point's supposed to be, and then I just basically match it to that point. Okay, just give me that smooth little surface. It can be very daunting. I know that this is certainly not for everybody, but if you want to build really nice looking cars inside Revit, it can be done. It's just that it's not the best tools to use, but this is a test case for those kind of test case. Now, the one thing good that I got out of this is that I was able to help Autodesk upload the files and test it out and see if it works for their AutoCAD Online or Autodesk Online viewer. So if you guys haven't signed up, you can sign up with that. So what I did is that I basically go into the viewer, and I just basically want to test out and see how good this is. Now, one thing I did help Autodesk find out is that why my surface is not showing up. So in one of the thread, if you want to find my username, all right, it's SYMAN 2000. Okay, so you notice that from that Revit, put it into here, you notice that there's a couple missing textures. This is a known limitation within the online viewer. Okay, if nobody ever built anything complicated inside Revit, like how do you know that they're gonna fix this problem? They probably would never figure that out. So by me doing a lot of this experimentation, what does is that it improves your software, improves your ability to push forward the model capability. That's something I think hopefully in the future Autodesk will make some of these tools really easy for people, but in most cases right now you're still having that limitation. So hopefully I give you some tips to basically show you how to model some of this element. Okay, it is very daunting. I would not recommend it unless you are very into Revit and likes to build stuff that is crazy. Okay, I did build a couple of vehicles. Okay, I did build this vehicle. I'm going to show it to you. Before I built, this is my third project that I'm built. I just want to test it out and see how it does. Now there are other stuff that I've built. I built the car before. So before I built this, it was this Ford Coupe. Okay, so this is what I built before. Again, it's using the same method, so you can build very organic shape kind of a car like that. Okay, so which is pretty nice. And then prior to that, my first project that I did was this Volkswagen Classic. This was probably the most easiest out of all three. Well, they all has its own difficulties, but the Volkswagen, the nicest thing about this is that the only toughest part is the front and this area. The rest is just basically using profile and then you just do the curved surfaces. Okay, because a lot of that, I think this is probably my first attempt just to say it's doable to build Revit car. Okay, mind you that the file size is not optimized. Most cases when you build a lot of this very high detail cars, you're going to end up getting about, let's say, 6 megabytes. Like this one, the first one I tested out, I try to keep it down to at least minimum 2 megabytes, but I cannot do it because every time there's an adaptive component, it just adds more and more sizes. So the best size I could get out of this is probably 6 megabyte at most. Even though I deleted a lot of the details and not putting in the door handles, still it's just not worth it. This is why a lot of people say, you know what, don't bother. But you know, sometimes you're gonna have purists saying that, you know what, I want to build a lot of this component inside Revit. You can try, but file size is not really optimized. Hopefully in the future, Autodesk will help people do this, but for now, it is what it is. Hopefully give you some inspiration because I'm going to continue building other stuff. One thing I'm going to be looking into is building people. Okay, probably comic book characters. I'm just going to think about doing it just to see if I could do it as realistic as possible. You never know because sometimes Revit, in the Revit world, anything can be used for anything because BIM is BIM and you want a true representation of that particular object. Okay, thank you very much.